On my 25th birthday, my mom ordered me to quit my job so I could babysit her boyfriend's kids full-time for free. During dinner, she announced, "It's time you started giving back." 5 days later, she asked, "So, are you ready to be useful?" And my answer was, "I'm Sabrina LeClaire, 25 female, and I guess this is one of those wake-up call stories that creeps in slowly until one day, it just explodes." My mom, Corinne, has always been a complicated woman, charming on the outside, deeply manipulative underneath. I spent most of my childhood raising myself while she chased men and drama. I never expected anything from her, but after clawing my way into a stable job in publishing and finally renting a place of my own, I thought she'd at least respect that I was trying. Then came my 25th birthday. That night, she made it clear she had different plans for me. Apparently, it was time I started giving back. She expected me to quit my job, move back into her house, and babysit her boyfriend's 3 young kids for free because, in her words, "We've done enough for you." I was stunned. Not just by the entitlement, but by the way she said it so matter-of-factly, like it was the most obvious and reasonable thing in the world. Her boyfriend Frank barely looked up from his phone during the whole conversation. The kids were screaming, and I was the only adult in the room who looked remotely uncomfortable. I didn't answer her that night. But 5 days later, she texted me, "So, are you ready to be useful?" Something in me cracked open. And I realized I wasn't just done with her nonsense. I was done playing the role of the dutiful daughter who sacrifices her peace for someone else's chaos. Now let me take you back to that week. The build-up. The pressure. The moment everything started to unravel for good. It started with a text I got while eating lunch in the staff kitchen. "Mom, so. Are you ready to be useful?" That was it. No greeting. No emoji. Just a demand, disguised as a question, wrapped in a guilt trip. I stared at my phone for a long time, my fork frozen midair, cold pasta clinging to it like it had a say in whether I'd finish eating or not. I didn't reply. I slipped the phone back into my bag, feeling heat crawl up my neck, not from anger, but from that old, familiar shame. The kind that comes when you're expected to give and give, but you never really get to ask why. Back at my desk, the guilt tried to settle in like it always did. But something in me pushed it away. That week, I went through the motions at work, but my head was somewhere else. I kept turning over the situation in my mind. What was it she thought I owed her? Was it rent for the years I spent taking care of myself while she nursed wine and heartbreak? Was it some twisted repayment for the roof over my head during high school, when I barely made it through because of the chaos at home? That Thursday, I decided to call her. Not because I wanted a fight, but because I wanted to draw a line. When she picked up, she sounded chipper, like nothing had happened. "Hey sweetie," she said, drawing out the syllables like I was 10 again and asking for ice cream. "I got your message," I said flatly. "And I wanted to talk about it." She said, distracted, probably folding laundry or walking around the house in those slippers she never washed. "So what's the verdict?" I could picture her smirking. She thought she'd won. Thought I'd caved. "I'm not doing it, Mom." Silence. I heard a door close in the background. "Excuse me?" "I'm not quitting my job. I'm not moving back in. I'm not babysitting Frank's kids." A beat passed. Then the tone changed. Like someone flicked a switch. "So that's it? After everything I've done for you? I gave up so much to raise you, you let me raise myself," I snapped. My voice shook. "I did your job for you while you dated men who couldn't even remember my name. I got myself through school. I paid for college with loans. I work, Mom. I pay my rent. I don't owe you anything." There was this cold, hollow laugh. "You think you're so above it all now, huh? Just because you live in some Matchbox apartment and write little book blurbs? I'd rather live in a Matchbox than under your roof again." The call ended with a hard click. The silence that followed was louder than anything she could have screamed at me. The next day, my cousin Rena called. "Hey. I just got off the phone with your mom," she said cautiously. "She says you've been acting out. That you're refusing to help out during a really hard time." I closed my eyes and exhaled. "She's telling people I abandoned her, isn't she? I mean, she's saying you could have stepped up. That Frank's overwhelmed. That she's been there for you." I didn't answer. There was no point. Rena meant well, but she didn't know the whole story. No one did. What they saw was Corinne, charismatic, witty, always the life of the family gathering. What they didn't see was the woman who, after a breakup, would drink half a bottle of red and cry at the dinner table while I made grilled cheese for us both at 14. They didn't see the time I had to walk Silas home from school last year because Mom forgot to pick him up and Frank had a thing. They didn't see the pattern. But I did. And I was done pretending I didn't. It wasn't just about the babysitting. It was about ownership. Control. She wanted to reel me back in, clip my wings before I flew too far. But I had tasted peace. Solitude. Independence. I wasn't giving that up, not even for the illusion of family. Over the next few weeks, I didn't hear much from my mother directly. What I did hear, though, was from a small chorus of extended family members, some I hadn't talked to in months, suddenly calling or messaging me with an odd concern in their tone. My Aunt Celeste sent me a Facebook message that read, "Hey hon, your mom's going through a lot. Maybe just help out for a bit? Family sticks together." My Uncle Dennis, who I hadn't spoken to since I was 20, texted, "You're not above helping your mother. That job you have, it's not like you're a surgeon or something." That one got to me more than I'd like to admit. It wasn't just the words, it was the implication that what I did didn't matter. That I was supposed to trade the thing I built, quietly and steadily, for someone else's chaos simply because family. The reality was, no one really knew what my day-to-day looked like. They didn't know I was finally waking up, not dreading the sound of my phone ringing. They didn't see me sitting at my tiny desk at night with a cup of tea, reading manuscripts and editing submissions, feeling for once like I belonged somewhere. But I was still rattled. I spent a few nights rereading my mother's texts, some older than I remembered, filled with little hints of control I hadn't picked up on before. "Don't go too far, you'll need us someday. It's not healthy for a girl to be alone so much. You'll become cold. Your job doesn't love you. Your family does." And yet, she'd never once visited my apartment. Never asked about my work, except to brush it off with a faint, "So, you still reading other people's stuff all day?" The tension grew at work, not because of pressure, but because of what was offered to me, something big. My editor, Pauline, approached me one Friday morning just before lunch, clipboard in hand, casual but firm. "You ever thought about pitching something original?" I blinked. "You mean like, a column? Or an essay? A series, even?" You've got that voice of reason meets lived experience vibe that hits. Especially with women over 30. People trust it. It took me a second to respond, because something about her tone told me this wasn't just a half-baked suggestion. She'd been watching. Waiting. And now, she was opening a door. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Actually, I have thought about it." I went home that night and stared at a blank Google Doc for hours. Then, without warning, the words came out, "I'm not my mother's backup plan, why I stopped setting myself on fire to keep my family warm." That title hit like a thunderclap. Not because it was clever, but because it was true. I didn't even write the full piece that night. I just stared at the title. Reread it. Whispered it under my breath like a mantra. It was the first time I realized my story wasn't just a private burden. It was relatable. And if I could tell it right, it might actually help someone else draw the line they've been too afraid to. By midweek, I sent Pauline a pitch. She responded within the hour, green light. "You're in." That small win felt seismic. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't just feel defiant, I felt seen. Still, part of me braced for the backlash. And it came, just not in the way I expected. I had blocked my mom's number the day after our last call. But she was nothing if not persistent. She emailed me through an old address I hadn't deleted, subject line, "Let's be civil." The message was short. "I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. We needed help. Family steps up. You're making this ugly." I didn't reply. I forwarded it to a folder I titled Emotional Landmines and closed my laptop. A week later, my cousin Rena called again. "She's telling people you're ungrateful. That you're trying to embarrass her. That you've changed." I laughed, but it wasn't bitter. It was the kind of laugh that rises up when you realize how small the trap was, how long you sat inside it thinking you owed the person who said it for you. "I have changed," I told Rena. "I'm finally telling the truth." Meanwhile, the first essay went live. And then the responses started. Not from family. From strangers. A woman named Melanie, 42, wrote, "This is my story too. You just gave it words." Another email, "I didn't know it was okay to say no to my mother. I didn't know I was allowed to want peace." And then something that stopped me mid-scroll. "Thank you for showing me that loving your family doesn't mean sacrificing yourself to them." That message haunted me in the best way. Because it told me what I'd been struggling to believe, that I wasn't cruel or selfish. I was simply choosing myself, something my mother had never modeled for me. I knew the peace might stir things up within my family. What I didn't expect was for it to make its way around my mother's social circle. It started with a shared link. A colleague from my old high school messaged me on Instagram with a screenshot of my article, reposted by someone named Tracy Delaney, Frank's older sister. Her caption? "Wow. Sounds familiar." I stared at it for a long time. She hadn't tagged me. But she didn't need to. My mother's circle was small-town tight, even in the city. What one of them knew, they all knew. It took less than 24 hours for the second wave to hit. That Saturday, while I was folding laundry in my tiny sunlit apartment, I got a text from Rena again. "Your mom posted a Facebook status. You probably don't want to read it, but also maybe you should." I wasn't planning to. I really wasn't. But curiosity got the best of me. And there it was, a long, venom-laced paragraph posted under a grainy photo of her with the kids in the backyard, a wine glass in her hand like always. It's funny how some people twist the truth to get attention. I've always been there for my daughter. I've made sacrifices. I've been a single mother. And now she writes a story where I'm the villain? Very disappointing to see how some people repay loyalty with public slander. The comments poured in heart emojis, "Stay strong," and, from a few old family friends, backhanded sympathy. Everyone handles trauma differently. I'm sure she'll come back around eventually. Kids go through phases. But buried beneath the faux concern was a clear message: Sabrina is the ungrateful daughter. Corinne is the wounded mother. The narrative is set. And here's the part one didn't expect: I didn't care. Not like I used to. That same day, I checked my article stats. It had over 180,000 reads. Emails were still trickling in. One from a woman named Helene, a counselor in Boston, who said she'd shared it with 3 of her clients. "This gave them words they've never been able to say out loud," she wrote. "You've started something." It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a conversation. One that clearly made some people deeply uncomfortable, especially the ones who benefited from silence. But of course, my mom couldn't leave it at just a Facebook post. Monday morning, I got an email from a local lifestyle blog, the kind that did puff pieces on small business owners and community heroes. The subject line made my stomach drop: request for comment. Community story. Inside was a short message from a writer named Carrie Benson, asking if I'd be willing to comment on a story they were developing about modern caregiving and family estrangement. I scrolled down and there it was: they had already interviewed Corinne. I didn't need to guess what she said. I already knew. That I was selfish. Cold. That I'd abandoned family during a hard time. That all she ever wanted was to feel close to her only child again, and now I was dragging her name through the mud for likes. I almost deleted the email. Almost. But something stopped me. Instead, I asked Carrie if we could talk on the phone. We spoke that afternoon. She was younger than I expected, maybe 30, sharp and respectful. "I want to be fair to both sides," she said. "Your mom gave an emotional account of her experience, but I know there's more to the story." I took a deep breath. There always is. For the next 45 minutes, I walked her through the years of quiet neglect, of being more caretaker than child, of the gaslighting, the guilt. I didn't rant. I didn't embellish. I just told the truth. Carrie listened. And at the end, she said softly, "I don't think I've ever heard someone explain that kind of family dynamic so clearly. Thank you for trusting me." When the article went live 2 weeks later, it wasn't sensational. It was thoughtful, balanced, but clear. And for once, the framing didn't cast me as the bitter daughter, it cast me as a woman who made a boundary, and refused to apologize for it. The reaction was swift and split. My mother blocked me on every platform. So did Frank. I expected that. What I didn't expect was the email from Nicole, Frank's ex-wife. She'd read the original essay. Then the follow-up article. "I didn't realize what kind of situation my kids were walking into when they spent weekends over there," she wrote. "I always thought it was just a bit of chaos. But now I see it was a pattern. I've already started the paperwork to change the custody agreement. Thank you for helping me see it before something worse happened." I sat back in my chair after reading that. Just sat there. Quiet. It hadn't even been revenge. Not really. But the consequences were starting to fall where they belonged naturally, with weight. And even with all that behind me, something in me still wrestled with guilt. Not from anything I'd done, but from how long I'd let it all sit in me unspoken. I remembered being 17, skipping prom because my mom had a panic attack the night before and said she needed me at home. I remembered 22, getting my first job offer, and her asking, "Do you really think you're ready for a grown-up job?" I remembered every time I'd made myself small to keep the peace. And now, with everything out there, it was like I was finally allowed to take up space. Not as her daughter. Just as me. I didn't hear anything from Corinne for 3 full months. 3 months of silence. Of peace. Of my phone not buzzing with cryptic texts or late-night guilt traps. Of not bracing every time I logged into Facebook. I'd blocked her, but still my body had its own memory. A phantom vibration in my chest when I passed by her side of town. That low-key anxiety that's hard to explain unless you've been someone else's emotional regulator since childhood. But gradually, the static quieted. I kept writing. One essay turned into a regular series. Daughters of Unreasonable Mothers became the column name. Pauline's idea. She said the emails hadn't stopped. If anything, they multiplied. Middle-aged women. Retired therapists. Adult sons who hadn't spoken to their parents in a decade. Some of the letters were short thank yous. Others were entire essays themselves. But the theme was always the same: I thought I was alone. It struck me how many people, across ages and states and upbringings, were walking around with the same kind of grief, the kind that doesn't have a clean name. It wasn't grief for someone who died. It was grief for someone you needed who never showed up. Somewhere in the middle of all this, I decided to reclaim something small, but deeply symbolic. I signed up for a 6-week photography class. It was held at the Minneapolis Institute of Art, tucked away in one of their studio rooms behind the main galleries. Just once a week, Thursday evenings. But it felt like a declaration. Because growing up, whenever I wanted to take a class, art, writing, anything creative, my mom would say, "You need to focus on something useful." Even when we had the money. So I'd let it go. I let a lot of things go. But this time, I bought myself a decent second-hand DSLR, showed up to that first session, and took a seat among a group of strangers who didn't know a thing about my past. I was just Sabrina. I wasn't someone's daughter or scapegoat. Just a woman with a camera. We spent the first class walking through the building, looking at light and shadow. I remember crouching near a window, trying to catch the way sunlight hit a marble bust. And I realized for the first time in months I wasn't thinking about her. Not about what she'd said. Not about what she might be saying now. Not about how angry she probably still was. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was living. Still, life doesn't pause just because you're healing. Late one Sunday afternoon, I got a call from Rena again. Her voice was lower than usual. Not cautious, just quiet. So, Frank and your mom broke up. I paused mid-step in the middle of my kitchen. What? Yeah. Apparently he moved out last week. Took the kids. She's been calling everyone, trying to get sympathy. Said he blindsided her. I waited. And? She also said she made mistakes. That she might have gone too far with how she handled things. I sat down slowly. It wasn't that I wanted her to fall apart. I didn't. But it was surreal to hear that cracks were showing in her version of events. And now? I asked. She's asking around. About you. If you'd be willing to talk. I didn't respond for 2 days. I reread Rena's message 3 or 4 times, then went back to my writing, to my walks, to my photos. I gave myself time. Not because I was preparing to forgive. But because I needed to know truly, in my bones, whether there was anything she could say that would make it worth reopening that door. And I kept coming up with the same answer, no. Because she wasn't reaching out directly. She was still triangulating. Still testing the waters through other people. That was her pattern. Corinne didn't apologize. She strategized. Instead of replying, I added another essay to my drafts folder. This one was slower. More raw. Less structured. It started with a line I wasn't sure I wanted anyone to read yet. My mother didn't break my heart. She just kept putting it down like it was something she could come back to later. I didn't even know what the piece would become. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was writing it. Not to process anymore. Not to prove anything. But because it was mine. The story. The voice. The boundary. All of it mine now. And then something happened that twisted the situation in a direction I hadn't anticipated. Carrie, the reporter from the local blog, reached out again. I thought you'd want to see this, she wrote. Not publishing it. Just, thought you should know. Attached was a draft of a guest submission someone had sent in. Anonymous, but clearly Corinne. It was titled, Estranged Mothers Are Still Mothers, What It's Like to Be Cut Off by the Child You Raised Alone. It was drenched in self-pity. Claims about sacrifice. About being misunderstood. About daughters being poisoned by therapy culture. I didn't feel rage reading it. Not even sadness. I felt hollow. Because it proved what I already knew. She didn't want reconciliation. She wanted redemption from strangers. I didn't tell anyone about it. Not Rena. Not Pauline. I let it sit in my inbox like an echo in a sealed room. Instead, I scheduled a new piece to go live. When estrangement isn't a phase, it's a boundary you finally enforced. It went up on a Thursday. Same day as my photography class. By that evening, I was in a studio, editing shots of windows and shadows, while the article made its way across inboxes and Twitter feeds. I didn't check the comments until the next morning. And when I did, the first one said, "Thank you. I didn't go to my mom's birthday last week, and I felt like the worst person alive. Now I feel like maybe I'm just someone who finally chose peace." A few weeks after the anonymous submission was quietly rejected by the blog, I received an invitation in the mail. A pale lavender envelope, my name in cursive, the kind of thing someone sends when they want to appear composed. It was from my mother. Inside was a card. Cream-colored. No branding, just a single line in the center, "Family is forever." Below it, a date, time, and address hers. She was hosting a brunch in the spirit of forgiveness and moving forward. That was her exact wording. Not an apology. Not a conversation. A brunch. A performance. Rena confirmed that she was inviting everyone. Extended family, church friends, even people from her book club. It wasn't about me. It was about her reclaiming the narrative. About proving she could move on while looking like the bigger person. I didn't respond. I didn't attend. Instead, on the morning of her brunch, I did something so small, so simple, and yet it was, in every way, the final note in a long, painful symphony. I slept in. I brewed coffee. Slow. Poured oat milk into my mug while the sunlight slid across the kitchen tiles. Then I took a walk around Lake Bde Makaska, camera slung over my shoulder, hoodie pulled up, headphones in. No one needed anything from me that day. No one was keeping score. And for the first time I felt no urge to explain myself. Not to her. Not to anyone. A few days later, I got a call from Pauline. "I don't want to freak you out," she said, "but we've had a syndication request." "For the column?" "No. For a book." I froze. "What?" "A small press out of Portland. They love the tone. They want to know if you'd consider expanding your essays into a memoir, something about daughters reclaiming themselves." They used the word anthemic. My mouth went dry. I opened my laptop, pulled up the folder labeled Essays, Real Ones, and just stared. All of it, the years of invisible labor, the silence, the guilt. It had built something. Something real. Not just pain. Purpose. When I signed the contract 2 months later, I didn't tell my mother. I didn't announce it on Facebook. I didn't send a veiled post. I didn't need to. The book would come out in a year. It would land in libraries, bookstores, therapist waiting rooms. Maybe even on the same shelf where she'd once told me, "You're not a writer, Sabrina. Writers have something important to say." I didn't write it for her. I didn't write it about her. I wrote it for every woman who sat in their car an extra 5 minutes outside a family dinner, just to breathe. For every adult child who never got a birthday card without a string attached. For every person who thought breaking away made them selfish when really, it made them free. The last time I heard my mother's voice was through a voicemail Rena forwarded, not because I asked, but because she thought I should have the choice to listen. I played it once, headphones on, heart steady. "I don't know what you want from me, Sabrina. I didn't do everything right, but I did my best. I hope someday you'll remember the good times. That's all." I didn't save it. I didn't cry. I just deleted it. Because the truth is, she was right. I would remember the good times. But I'd also remember who I had to become to survive the rest. And the revenge? It wasn't explosive. It wasn't loud. It was living better. It was becoming someone I liked. It was the peace of a weekend morning with no drama. A career born from truth, not performance. A sense of self untouched by anyone's expectations but my own. It was this, knowing that she still talked about me, still tried to control the version of the story that lived in other people's heads, and that it didn't matter. Because I no longer needed anyone to believe me. I believed myself. And that's how you win, not by proving someone wrong, but by no longer needing to.